Thank you, Stuart, and thank you everybody for joining us on our last webinar. I'm really excited to talk to you about practical assessment for home adaptations and introduce our speaker for the day. But firstly, I just want to go through, as usual, just a little bit about the charity and what we do, just to make you aware of DLF. So DLF has been around now for around 50 years, and we provide impartial information and advice to over 2 million people annually. And we do that to help people with independent living, to assist with daily activities, to help them enjoy their hobbies, anything really that somebody wants to achieve that they've lost the ability to do because of a disability or aging. Our aim really is to add life to years through practical advice. And we do this through a number of ways. We have a website called Living Made Easy, which is an online marketplace with over 10,000 products from over 950 retailers. And it has advice articles and case studies and information around it to help the public decide on which piece of equipment might be best for them. All of this is written by occupational therapists and reviewed regularly. And simple aids can then be purchased by just clicking through to the online retailers. We also have Ask Sarah, which some of you might be aware of, which is a self-assessment tool. It has over 90 different topics. Once you've chosen a topic, you can work through around sort of 10 to 15 very simple questions that will ask you around your daily living tasks. Once you've completed the assessment, at the end you'll get a personalised report and advice around equipment and a list of equipment that might be able to assist you. At the moment, we have a range of custom versions in certain areas of the country, and charities and local authorities can actually bespoke it to their needs, which works really well for the local population. We also have DLF for Professionals, which is why we're here today, and part of DLF for Professionals is our training course. But I first want to just talk to you a little bit about our new prescribing tool. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the Hamilton Index, which was a bunch of probably dusty folders sat on every OT shelf in the country at one point, and it was a catalogue of products that were available for people, and it would assist practitioners to make choices around equipment and to know what was available. We moved online to DLF data, and actually in March this year, March 21, we're actually going to be launching Pro Assist, which is a new version, more up to date. And the tool will enable practitioners to guide their way through equipment choices, see some evidence base around the best things to choose, case studies, manuals, anything that you could possibly need around equipment advice. You could also use it for CPD and to print reports to give to clients or use for justifications and many other purposes. If you're interested in getting involved in the project, there is still time. We're asking for people to have a quick review of it at the moment, so please do get in touch, and our contact details will be at the end of the presentation. As a part of the professional suite, so like I say, we also offer training, and we're proud to announce that our Moving and Handling conference is finally returning. Thank goodness, back next year in February 22, we are going to be one of the first, hopefully face-to-face moving and handling conferences that we'll be running. So hopefully we'll be able to see you there. We'll be able to get your hands on and actually play with some equipment, which has been a long time coming. But the most thing I'm looking forward to is being able to actually speak to people face to face for a change. So please do come along and check out the website for details on that. But lastly, training and all this stuff that we do for professionals helps us generate income to support our charitable aims. So every time you purchase a course with us, you're actually helping the people that you support as well, because you're helping to keep our charitable services alive. So we offer training around equipment and adaptations, and we offer open and commissioned courses. So today we're actually taking a snippet, like we've done for the last three webinars, from our Home Adaptations for Professionals course, which actually consists of 5 modules, which is run over 5 days. Well, we're starting to roll them out from May, so when we're actually allowed out again, which is great. And today we're looking at the multiple levels option. And this module looks around getting from one floor to another. So it includes things like stair lifts, through floor lifts, and the clinical reasoning justifications for those things. But I have waffled on enough to you, so I am going to pass you over to the fantastic Catherine Rushton, who is going to take you through the snippet from the Home Adaptations. Thank you ever so much, Catherine, for joining us, and take it away.
Thanks very much. I think before we start, just a little bit about me. I've worked across health and social care, housing and the private sector for many years now. And throughout my career, I've spent much time completing assessments, considering solutions for individuals, helping them to overcome the barriers in their environment. Obviously, the solutions have been wide-ranging, but I've predominantly been involved with major adaptations and specialist equipment. So as Claire says, today we're just going to take a brief look at some of the content of that multiple levels module within the practical assessment for home adaptation series. Obviously we can't cover everything, but we hope that this will give you a taster of what this course actually has to offer. So what do we actually mean when we talk about multiple levels in the home? We're actually talking about accessing, the different sides of the the different parts of the house which aren't on the ground floor level. It's moving between that split level of a property, or it might also be just accessing a maisonette. So what are the range of adaptations that are available? Claire touched on them before. We're talking about rails that might be available for the stairs. We talk about a stair climber. That's the one that you can see to the left of the left picture there. We also have stair lifts, or we've got internal step lifts, or what we're going to be concentrating on today, which is the actual, through floor lifts. Alternatives, if access upstairs isn't feasible, then we might be looking at alteration to existing space on the ground floor or extensions. So what do we do when we're actually looking to decide upon that solution? We need to think about that sequential approach that we as occupational therapists use. We always look to consider the least restrictive option first. So that's, looking at technique and prompting, looking at minor adaptations and equipment, which might obviously be used in conjunction with that technique and prompting. But then finally, we would look at at a minor adaptation, which in this case is accessing another level in the house, basically. So, sorry, my slide won't move. What about then those factors in decision making? What is it we actually have to think about? So, as an occupational therapist, we complete our assessment, but to make that decision, it is important that we need to remember that it should be reasonable and practical to carry out those relevant works, but also necessary and appropriate to meet the needs of that individual. So in relation to the provision of the adaptations, perhaps through a disabled facilities grant, then we do look first of all at the reasonable and practicable. A lot of the time that's obviously the housing authority's responsibility if there is that DFG involved. So they need to think about the age and condition of the property, the structural characteristics of the property, but also take account of those building regulations, which are all important in this sort of situation. But regardless of how that adaptation is to be funded, the occupational therapist also considers whether or not it is reasonable and practicable in relation to not just the design and layout of the property, but perhaps also how that space is used by that individual and the impact that the adaptation might actually have on others who live at that property. There should be sort of no or very limited impact on the use of existing facilities. We then think about it being necessary. So again, is it necessary as far as practicable? You know, we look at the assessed needs of the person. We're looking to enable them to manage a specific task or an activity and remain living in their home as independently as possible. Obviously, you know, we need to identify their needs through that assessment, but we also need to focus on their strengths and focus on the assets of the individual to actually achieve that positive change within their lives. We then look at the appropriateness of the adaptation. It needs to be appropriate whilst to meet the need, but we also need to make sure that it meets that need, but with the least amount of restriction. We want somebody to be able to carry out their activity and fulfil the purpose in their home. For example, if we think about a parent being able to access the upper floors of the house to put their children to bed and read a story, obviously the solution should be safe. It should work to manage or reduce risk and not increase it. But we also need to work with our customers and our carers, because we do want to ensure that their choice and their control is considered in achieving, obviously, those most appropriate and positive outcomes. And then finally, we do need to consider cost effectiveness. We need to think about, well, actually, you know, is it, you know, the most appropriate, you know, thing to do? Would it, in certain instances, would a ground floor adaptation to provide bedroom and level access shower, although that could solve the problem and reduce the risk, but we do need to think, is it the most appropriate and reasonable solution for everyone? No, it isn't. We also have to think about, you know, you could move from a house to a bungalow or a flat. That could be an option for some people. This would remove the need to move between levels, but again, not everyone would be in a position to do this. Then we might also think about, you know, the use of a stair lift. Again, it might be the best option to allow a person to transfer from one level of the house to another. But as we all know, this might not be practicable. It might not be appropriate. And that's when we might, you know, consider the through floor lift. So really, sort of in summary, our decision here should be based on it being the least restrictive, the most enabling, and the safest within a balanced context. What we now need to do is take account, obviously we need to take account of whether it's reasonable, practicable, appropriate and necessary. So if we look at that solution then, when would we actually consider a through floor lift? We'd actually consider it really when a person is unable to manage the stairs. We'd consider it when their needs can't be met on the existing ground floor. We need to, you know, think about it when, you know, moving to that new house or rehousing, as we said, when that isn't an option. And we also need to think about it when a stair lift is not appropriate. But in addition to these points, we also need to think about the suitability for the long-term needs. Think about the facilities that person needs to reach upstairs. Can those facilities actually be adapted to meet the need? But what we might find that in some cases upstairs may have already been adapted to provide those level access facilities. Sorry, gone too far. Let's go back. Okay, I just want to very briefly, think about the features of a stair lift, and what we, as occupational therapists, might have to consider, in respect of this. Obviously, a wide range of stair lifts are available from lots of different companies, and each have got a variety of standard options, along with some of the optional features. The technical representatives from the various companies would be happy to discuss these features, but what you as a therapist would need to consider really is, what size of carriage do you require? You've got to think about the person's footprint measurements, which we'll actually have a look at later. But we need to think, as I say, who will be using the lift? Is it just a single person standing? Is it a wheelchair with a carer? But also think about, is the carriage going to be enclosed, or is it going to be open carriage design with half height doors? We need to think about the weight limit of the lift. Again, this relates to, who's actually being carried in the lift. Is it just for one person, or is it for a carer as well? But also we need to think about, is there a plus size wheelchair or heavy duty wheelchair that's going to be used? We also need to think about the actual door opening. Can your customer manage a manual door, or are they, going to need a door that's power assisted? But the use of the door can depend really on dexterity, strength, and reach. Then think about the seat. What sort of seat? If you need a seat, what type is needed? Is it a tip up? Is it fixed, perching, or heavy duty? Then think about, are grab rails going to be needed to assist them once they're in the lift carriage? Do they need help when standing or sitting on the seat? You also need to just think about the lighting. Is an automatic internal light required, or is a manually switched light going to be sufficient? And then finally, I think, you need to think about those controls. Are they going to be manual, or do you require a remote control? You need to obviously decide which is most appropriate. In addition, you will find that alternative choices are available for those controls. It might be a joystick or a large button for those with limited dexterity or visual impairment. And then, just as a note also, you might just need to think about an internal alarm or phone. Is that required if there is actually a problem for the person in the lift? As there are standard features, within the lift, all should have pressure sensitive detectors that will detect the obstruction to the roof or to the underside of the carriage. There should be that fully compliant fire seal around the opening, and there will be a battery backup, and the battery backup will return the lift to the ground floor in the event of a power cut, and there would also be a manual door release to exit once you reach the ground floor. You will find that there are some lifts which actually have a battery backup that will allow the lift to fully function in both directions. What we're going to do actually to just try to illustrate, how that decision-making process really when recommending a through-floor lift. I'm actually going to take you through a case study just to try and bring it to life. Sorry, my next slide. Thank you. So the following referral was received from a community matron requesting a stair and bathing assessment for this gentleman we're going to hear about. Now, the referral was identified as requiring urgent attention to avoid risk of falls and social isolation, also care breakdown, package of care or possible residential placement. So let's just have a look at our man. And my controller seems to be missing. Next slide, please. Sorry. So here we've got, if we just consider the person, so we've got this 64-year-old man, let's call him Mr. Biggs, and he lives with his wife. She generally supports her husband with personal care activities, and his wife and their children live nearby and they visit regularly and help as required. He weighs about 114 kilos and is 5 feet 8 inches tall. He's got multiple health conditions. He's got type 1 diabetes and has pain, swelling in both his feet, and has this associated neuropathy. He's also got severe ulceration to his left heel and one toe, and receives daily treatment from nursing services at home to manage the problem. He also has a right-sided weakness, particularly in his right side due to a recent stroke. He has angina, depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety, quite probably as a result of the health problems he's had over the time. And he takes multiple medications and needs to attend hospital visits on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So Mr. Biggs uses a wheelchair. He is able to propel himself just a short distance. Up until recently, he was using a walking frame and was able to go up and downstairs on his bottom, although this wasn't an ideal situation. That was his choice because he didn't want to sleep downstairs. Unfortunately, though, due to recent deterioration in his health and mobility, his balance and standing tolerance, this isn't possible any longer. He is able to transfer with assistance whilst he takes the weight through his weakened right leg, but he's unable to take weight through the left leg at all due to the ulceration of the heel and toe. He is receiving ongoing physiotherapy input, but has got minimal rehabilitation potential. And at the moment, really, the main aim is being to maintain and improve his potential if possible. But in particular, we're looking at the ability to transfer. Nursing services report back to us that the healing process for his ulcerations is going to take some considerable time, if at all, and that due to his diabetes, unfortunately, his prognosis is not optimistic, and there is a risk of amputation being required in the future. Sorry, next slide. So if we just now think about the property that they live in a mid-terraced house, which is actually owned by Mr. and Mrs. Biggs. There's a small courtyard to the front and rear of the property, and there is a living room, kitchen with a dining area downstairs, and then there are 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom and a separate toilet. And at the moment, to allow his wife to, get him out to his hospital appointments, etc., they do actually have a temporary ramp to just help with the situation with the access. Next slide, please. So what we need to do now is really just think about the task, which, as we know in this instance, is accessing both levels of the house. But when we're looking at the task, we do need to consider the person and the environment. Those can't be forgotten. So what we've identified is that Mr. Biggs is unable to climb the stairs due to his deteriorating health and mobility, and that all his essential facilities are actually on the first floor. Now, when we look at the task, we start to ask ourselves some questions, which will then help us to, come to this decision. So we think about, well, why does the person need to complete the task? As we said, for Mr. Biggs, it's necessary for him to access both floors in the house. The first floor of his property to reach bedroom, toilet, bathroom. And by being able to access those, he'll actually be able to regain privacy, dignity and independence. And access to the ground floor is for his living and kitchen dining room. He really wants to be able to use the whole of his house, not just the ground floor. Another question we ask about the task is, well, how is it currently being completed? Well, at the moment, as we've heard, he's unable to climb the stairs due to these multiple health problems. And even before that, the way he was climbing the stairs, getting up the stairs, really wasn't the most ideal way. We know that there's minimal potential there for rehabilitation, and there is a high risk, a very high risk really, of that additional disability and deterioration in health. He currently sleeps downstairs in a partitioned area in the dining room and uses a commode or a bottle. Obviously, this is where we get those issues with privacy, dignity and loss of independence. But also using that dining area as his bedroom, that's also meant that the family haven't been able to enjoy their weekly Sunday lunches together. And that is obviously having a further impact on his mental health. Lastly, we consider the frequency of the task. Again, in this instance, Mr. Biggs would need to be able to move between, the ground level and the first floor level several times a day. So, when we've thought about obviously the person, the environment, the task, we then look at our interventions. And obviously what we did was there was a full needs and occupational therapy assessment completed. We used subjective and objective information. And then we looked at that information, we analysed it. Options were then discussed, including why solutions had been discounted. And then we came to an agreement with Mr. and Mrs. Biggs as to what that solution would be. So this process of clinical reasoning was used to determine that a major adaptation was required, and it was the through floor lift, an adaptation to the first floor bathroom and toilet into a level access shower room, and also provide some permanent ramping to the access of the property. The major adaptation recommendation that we were making was obviously necessary to meet Mr. Biggs' current and his long-term needs, and appropriate to maximise that safety, regain independence and dignity, and improve his mental well-being, and reduce the caring role, or try to make better that caring role for his wife. But there were some considerations in actually coming to that conclusion. So when we along that process, really, obviously, we did have to consider, well, what other options are available? What would we look at? And the first one we looked at was the stair lift. And in this situation, it was not appropriate. The staircase was too narrow, and there was limited space on the landing for safe transfers. But in taking that in mind, it was also considered it wouldn't have been reasonable to install the stair lift. We would have had to have carried out some costly adaptation to the stair lift and the landing area to allow that installation, which obviously wouldn't have been economically viable. Thinking about the transfers also, that stair lift provision wasn't appropriate because it was unsafe to carry out those transfers, but also we needed to think about the long-term prognosis and abilities, and would he be able to continue with that transfer in the long term. Sorry, next slide. Okay, other interventions that we considered was an extension. In this case, there wasn't any available space to extend the property, therefore, again, wasn't practicable. However, even if there had been space, we would have considered those internal adaptations first. We needed to make sure it was going to be not just reasonable, but also cost effective. Would it have been reasonable for us to have incurred that cost of the bedroom and bathroom if a suitable, less costly option was possible? As we've said before, a ground floor adaptation to provide a bedroom and level access shower may meet the need, may reduce the risk, but a through floor lift would still achieve this with less upheaval and at a lesser cost. Final option that was considered, could have been moving to a new house. This wasn't an option at all for this family due to cost, but also negative equity in their property, and they wanted to stay, living close to their family so that they could actually continue to, their company, for their company, but also for the help that they provide. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so we're now just going to take a little bit more of a look at the person and, think about those elements. And if we start with really thinking about their mobility equipment and the equipment that they require. So in this situation, Mr. Biggs required a wheelchair for mobility. Therefore, we knew that a wheelchair accessible lift was required. But obviously in other situations, you might need to take account of the presence of the carer and the need to take on other equipment such as a walking frame. And again, we will look at measuring that space in a short while. There are compact lifts that are available for those who, just require a standing lift. We then think about the carer. Is a carer needed? And if so, we need to make sure that we actually have the space available for that person. We also need to think about the health conditions and prognosis of the individual. We heard that Mr. Biggs has type 1 diabetes with associated neuropathy and all the other problems that he's got. But in this situation, based on that feedback really from the physiotherapist and our assessment and from nursing services, we determined it was unlikely there was going to be any significant improvement in his is health. So therefore the prognosis not brilliant. We then think about the weight of the individual. Again, remember, it's not just the person, it's also the wheelchair and the carer, because we need to make sure we actually get the right capacity of lift. In this instance, a standard lift, was appropriate, although heavy-duty through-floor lifts are available for plus-size people and heavier wheelchairs. We touched before just about the presence of a carer. We say it wasn't necessary here, but for others it might be necessary. If you think about those people who are nervous, or children, or those with dementia or learning disability, you need to consider their ability to travel safely alone and to operate the controls, understand that instruction that's needed, possibly learn a new task, and remember, how to carry out that activity. And what we need to think about that if their cognitive ability is deteriorating and a through-floor lift is the best solution, you would obviously need to allow space in the future for the carer. We then need to think the person, what about how they're going to enter and exit the lift? For Mr. Biggs, he could wheel himself a short distance and was able to enter the get in and out of a space quite readily, but the situations that might not be possible. It might be that they are going to need somebody to help them. We also need to look at their physical ability to use the controls, for example. We mentioned earlier about varieties are available for those with limited dexterity or poor vision, but Mr. Biggs didn't have any difficulties using a standard control. Final part that we need to just think about is motivation and preferences. For Mr. Biggs, he was motivated and he preferred to access upstairs and be as independent as possible. But for some individuals, that lack of motivation to want to go upstairs and regain a level of independence, could mean that the adaptation would actually remain unused. So you do need to make sure that you really do take account of those that motivation and preference, because the last thing we need is an adaptation that's been completed to actually never be used. Sorry, next slide. Oh, yeah. Right. So we talked a bit before about measuring the person, and we need to, when we're measuring the person, we think about the footprint, and this really consists of the overall depth of the person, the width of the person, or the width of the widest width. But we also need to look at the turning circle and the reach. Think about, are they going to be able to reach the controls as we talked about? And although this illustration here does show a wheelchair user, obviously these measurements apply to the whole range of mobility equipment and any carer support that's required. Also, although we need to think about the user's capabilities at the time of our assessment, we also need to think about, well, are they going to be able to manage this at other times as well? Can they actually repeat what they need to do again and again in the same size space? Might their ability to move around change? Their power or stamina and coordination vary? And, is it likely that their abilities may improve, but obviously may also deteriorate. So if we look at measuring first of all, the length of the person, And when we always measure from the forwardmost point, which in this case, when you're seated in a wheelchair, is probably the toes. But if you think about, a walking frame or a wheel walker, then this is likely to be the front legs of the frame or the wheels of the frame. We then have to measure, extend that measurement to the furthest point back, which in a self-propelling wheelchair may be the back of the wheel, or in another wheelchair it may be the handles. If there is a carer, then we think about it being the backmost point of the carer when they're stood behind the wheelchair. And this may vary according to the carer's posture, depending how much effort they need to put in when they're actually pushing the chair. And just remember that, if other mobility equipment is being used, then it's really what is the furthest most part of the body, really. Okay, so just thinking about the width. So we need to measure the width of the person to make sure they can fit through doorways, hallways, lift doors, any doors that they need to access. Again, this shows a person being pushed, but if they're using a self-propelled chair, then what we need to do is consider the widest point as they are propelling. Just make sure that you allow space for the position of the elbows. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so we now just have a quick look at the turning circle requirements. And again, we actually need to have this measurement really to make sure that we've got the space for access and egress into the through floor lift, but also to change direction to enter rooms on each floor. And whilst an empty wheelchair gives us a starting point, then obviously this does vary widely once we get the user sitting in the chair. Part M of building regulations does provide us with minimum standards, and in this case really a minimum 1500mm turning circle, which is clear of the lift door open at 90 degrees, should be provided at every level. And obviously that measurement of 1500mm is a useful guide, but as we know, nothing substitutes measuring the person, for real, because as we know that the space they need may actually be more or less than that given within the regulations. We also need to remember that, the turning circle needs to be considered with any type of mobility equipment, and again, needs to include the carer if any support is necessary. We're going to, in a minute, we're going to have a little look at a video. I know it might be familiar to those who have joined us for previous webinars. It just shows you how you might mark out a space to decide on the actual turning circle required. In the video, you'll see that it shows a person being wheeled, but the principles of these measurements will also apply for the person, using other, types of equipment. So, if we could start the video, please. So the area being defined by the laying out of two builders' tapes is that found outside of the lift door on each level. This is the area which will allow access and exit from the lift and change direction. The first measurement of 1200mm isn't relevant in this case, but what you'll find is that the second measurement of 1500mm square is the minimum standard turning circle clear of the lift when that door is actually open at 90 degrees. Now we can see how the minimum standard measurement of 15 millimetres square lines up in reality when our client and carer are brought into the equation. We can determine if it's reasonable for a person to move or be moved within the space, or whether a larger space is required. Let's look at that wheel-in again and consider both the position of the carer and the position of the client's feet. The carer is close to the wheelchair, but the toes of the person in the chair come beyond the edge of the space, and therefore a larger area may be required. Remember to allow space for anything that falls outside the marked area. Finally, consider the width, style and size of the wheelchair and size of the pushing posture of the carer, as these can all affect the size of the turning circle required. As you've seen, it's quite surprising how much space is needed dependent on the skills and abilities of the carer and user. We really do want to avoid banging toes, banging elbows, becoming wedged, or the carer not actually having that space to be able to provide any assistance with the task. Sorry, next slide. Okay, we also need to consider reach, and its reach whilst they're using whatever equipment is required, such as sitting in a wheelchair. We've got to think about independence versus support. Can the person reach the lift door handle, pull the door shut once in the lift and reach the controls? If we think about if reach is limited, then we do need to consider carefully the actual specification of the lift. And again, this is where the help from our technical representatives will come in, because they'll be able to advise us on available options such as power doors or alternative controls. We just want to make sure that we ensure that the solution will maintain that independence, choice and control of the individual and support the carer as required. Sorry, next, thank you. So let's just go back to thinking about the environment. Again, we don't just use our own expertise, but we do have access to several great companies who will come out and carry out those feasibility visits with us. We use their technical expertise in conjunction with ours to decide whether the adaptation will fit into the property, where we might locate it, and whether there are actually going to be any technical or structural challenges that are going to get in the way of that. So having measured the required footprint and the turning circle of the person, we are able to determine if adequate space is available. And that's not only to accommodate an appropriately sized through floor lift and turning space, but also to make sure that we've got that space on the landing to allow movement from room to room. We also, as we've touched on, we need to consider access to the bedroom and bathrooms on the first floor, including the door widths and the adaptability of other spaces such as the bathroom. And finally, we shouldn't forget other members of the household in their needs. And if we just think back to our case study, in this case, Mr. Biggs was happy, his wife was actually happy to consider any option that would allow her husband to regain independence. And in the case of the case study, we did actually look at two options. And the first option would have been the living room through to the front bedroom. This space was too small. And it meant that the living space, they would have lost the living space and the impact that would have actually had on the family being able to get together, so it would have negatively impacted on socialising. Second option was the kitchen dining room to the rear bedroom. And what we found here, that this was structurally and spatially feasible. The positioning of the through floor lift still allowed space in the dining room for the family to have their weekend get-togethers, and the rear bedroom, which wasn't often used, actually provided the space required upstairs. As we said, that you also need to think about the suitability of the rest of the property. So in this case, there was a door widening adaptation that was required in the upstairs rooms, and the access to the bathroom was going to be altered as part of the bathroom adaptation to provide that level access shower. In this instance, we didn't need to widen the doors. We knew that, Mr. Biggs had actually previously been, managing to get through those. Next slide. Okay, so what was the outcome? Well, for Mr. Biggs, the outcome was that he was eligible for a disabled facilities grant, and the works recommended to provide that permanent front ramped access through floor lift and the bathroom adaptation to provide that level access shower were all completed. The through floor lift enabled Mr. Biggs to safely access both his floors to complete activities of daily living, including his personal care and food preparation, which he actually loved to do. He loved to help his wife as much as he could. And the installation of the lift also returned that living space to them. It allowed them to socialise and enjoy meals as a family. As a result, independence, dignity and control, and the risk of falls and isolation, occupational deprivation, and that risk of increased levels of anxiety and depression have been reduced. And the presence of the through floor lift has also reduced that risk of carer injury and burden. So the summary, really, obviously our role as an occupational therapist is to focus on the needs of the person and their occupational performance regarding the task in hand. And when we decide on the solution to multiple levels and other solutions, then we have to consider many aspects. We think about the person, the task, and the environment. And as we heard, we said for the person, obviously we need to think about their diagnosis and prognosis, their weight and height, what their abilities are, whether that's physical or cognitive. Think about any mental health issues, their motivation, their roles, values, and really think about that risk awareness and reducing risk where possible. We thought about the task. Why does the person need to complete the task? How are they currently carrying it out? What are their strengths and limitations? And what was the frequency of the task? And then finally, we considered that environment, the environment that person needs to perform the task. What's the turning circle required? What are the door opening widths? What other areas do they need to access in the house? And what is their adaptability, or what is the adaptability of other essential facilities? And we mustn't forget about considering other members of the household. So we need to remember that all solutions need to be reasonable, practicable, necessary, and appropriate. Our aim is to meet the desired outcomes, to maximise, obviously, the safety and the independence of the individual, and support the carer and others who may step into that role of a carer in the future. We use our clinical reasoning. We identify that subjective and objective information that we've gathered. We come up with those potential solutions, and we give reasons why we've discounted some. And then, in agreement with our client and other people, we finally make our decision and justify which solution will best meet that need. Obviously, during that process, if we've got DFG involved in this, we would also support that funding authority by providing information to enable for them to make that decision around what is reasonable and practicable. And where a clear solution isn't evident, or maybe there is a conflict, then obviously we do need to try and work with everybody involved to try and find a compromise that will actually meet the need. So that is the end of the presentation, and I really just want to say, first of all, thank you for listening, and it's been lovely to be asked to present today on behalf of the Disabled Living Foundation, behind DLF. And I do believe that the slides and information will be made available to you following the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. That's absolutely fabulous. And thank you so much for that really informative presentation. Our contact details are on the screen, but I'll hand back over to Stuart to finish this off. Thanks ever so much, Catherine.